Welcome back to the deep dive. Our mission today, well, it's pretty laser focused. We are giving you, the learner, what's basically the ultimate cheat sheet, the 10 most powerful and effective ways you can really improve your English speaking fluency. And here's the big promise for this deep dive. You don't actually need a patient practice partner sitting opposite you. You don't need a formal classroom, and you certainly don't need huge blocks of uninterrupted time.
That's absolutely right. The sources we've pulled together today, they're really custom tailored. They're for those of you who feel, maybe a bit nervous or shy or just kind of stuck at that intermediate plateau, which is so common, where maybe you understand quite a lot.
Yeah, listening is okay.
Exactly. Listening comprehension feels strong, but actually speaking feels slow or halting, maybe even robotic. Look, we're not offering some kind of magic pill here. That's not realistic. What we have is a very structured, research-backed approach. It's designed to weave together proven methods, the goal.
Yeah.
Smoother, more confident, and genuinely, natural speech. It's really about getting past those cognitive hurdles, the things in your head that stop you from just speaking naturally.
Okay, right. So let's unpack that. Let's start, maybe, by rewiring the internal system, as you put it. We're beginning with what we're calling the foundational cognitive shifts. Techniques 1, 2, and 3. These are the adjustments happening inside your head first. They fundamentally change how you process English, and then, crucially, how you produce it. Okay, technique number 1. It sounds foundational, maybe even obvious, but it gets overlooked so often. The single biggest secret weapon to speaking better English is actually mastering how you listen. All the research we looked at hammers home the simple, inescapable truth. You just cannot speak what you haven't really heard properly.
It's the input-output principle, basically. Learners often want to jump straight to speaking, to active production. But you see, the quality of your output, your speaking, it can never really exceed the quality and the depth of your input, your listening. When you listen to native speakers using good quality material, podcasts, YouTube videos, movies, whatever, you're doing way more than just understanding the words. You're actually mapping the entire structure, the sound, the feel of the language in your brain.
Right. And this isn't just having English on in the background while you're doing dishes, is it? We need to be actively focusing on specific things.
Precisely. Passive listening has its place, but for this, you need intense focus. Focus on 3 crucial interlinked elements. The pronunciation, obviously, but also the tone and the rhythm. If you only focus on vocab and grammar rules, you completely miss the music of English. English is what linguists call a stress-timed language.
Okay, stress-timed. What does that actually mean in practice? That sounds a bit technical. Might put some learners off.
No, it's actually vital to get this. It's not as scary as it sounds. See, unlike some languages, maybe syllable-timed languages, where each syllable gets roughly the same beat.
Like Spanish, maybe?
Yeah, or French. In English, we punch, we stress specific content words, the nouns, the main verbs, the adjectives, the important bits. And then we sort of rush through or reduce the little function, words, prepositions, articles, auxiliary verbs. This is called reduction. So if you try to say every single word clearly and perfectly distinctly, you actually sound, unnatural. You can even be harder to understand, even if your grammar is technically perfect.
Okay. So the secret sauce isn't just what words they say, but how they sort of skim over the unimportant ones.
Skim or squash them.
And how strongly they hit the key words, the main ideas.
Exactly that. That rhythm, that subtle speeding up and slowing down, the stressing and unstressing, that's what makes speech sound fluent and natural.
Oh, yeah.
So the practical application here is active, focused listening. When you hear a phrase, let's say, I'm going to the store, and you really notice how the native speaker squashed going to into gonna.
Right, or even gonna.
Yeah, gonna, and rushed through maybe barely pronounced it, I'm gonna the store. You must repeat it out loud. Immediately. Try to copy that sound exactly. This is immediate active repetition. It turns passive hearing into active muscle memory for your mouth. Over time, your brain just starts to automatically copy these natural patterns. It's
right.
It's exactly how little kids pick up their first language. You hear the sounds, the melody, the flow, way before they figure out all the complex grammar rules.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's move to technique number 2. This tackles what you called the biggest enemy of speed and flow, the translation trap. I think almost every intermediate speaker recognizes this. You have this complex internal process happening. Step 1. Have a thought in your native language. Step 2, translate it word for word. Step 3, try to rearrange the words to fit English grammar. And then finally, step 4, you actually speak. By the time you've gone through all that mental gymnastics...
Yeah, the moment's passed, the conversation's moved on. It's a massive performance bottleneck. The sources we looked at illustrate this really well, using the idea of cognitive cost. It takes mental energy. So if you have a simple thought, maybe in Bengali, like the example given, may my wife read to our Hami Pani Kabo, I will drink water. If you rely on translating that sequentially in your head, I water, will drink. No, I will drink water. You're essentially loading up two different language systems in your brain at the same time just to produce one simple sentence. You're wasting so much processing power on steps that ideally shouldn't even be there.
Right. So the core challenge then is training your mind to just skip that middleman, skip the translation step entirely, and think directly in English. But I mean, how do we even begin to do that? It sounds like my head would just be full of confused noise if I tried.
Yeah, it does feel like that at first. And that's where the actionable steps from the research come in. The advice is to start really small and simple. Focus on immediate, concrete things around you. Don't try to translate your complex philosophical thoughts right away. Instead, start narrating simple, everyday tasks in real time. So if you're making coffee, you could say, either out loud or just in your head, okay, first, I boil the water. Kettle's on. Then I need to open the cabinet. Where's the coffee? I need 2 spoons of sugar. You're deliberately linking the concept, the physical spoon, the sugar, directly to the English words, completely bypassing your native language.
Okay, I can see how that works for simple things. But here's a worry. If I force myself to think only in English, won't I just end up practicing incorrect sentences, like cementing bad grammar or awkward phrasing inside my own head? It sounds like I could be actively practicing mistakes.
That is a very common and very legitimate concern. And it's precisely why Technique 1, the deep listening, is so absolutely crucial they work together. Because you're constantly feeding your brain high-quality, natural English input through listening. The correct patterns, the right way things should sound, are already being stored subconsciously. So when you then force yourself to produce thoughts directly in English, even if your attempt is a bit clunky at first, your brain actually starts comparing your output to those correct patterns it already knows. It creates a kind of internal self-correction mechanism. It notices the mismatch. Now, the sources are very clear. Initially, yes, it will feel awkward, it'll feel slow, it will definitely be mentally tiring. It's like your brain is running a brand new, complex piece of software it's not used to. But that discomfort, that feeling of effort, that is actually what drives the improvement and eventually leads to faster processing.
Got it. So the struggle is actually part of the process. And the long-term impact is, well, it's huge. You radically reduce that cognitive load, that mental translation work. You shift from constantly constructing sentences piece by piece to simply retrieving concepts or even whole phrases directly in English. And that leads to genuine fluency and, I imagine, a lot more confidence, too.
Absolutely. And that leads us perfectly into technique number 3, which is about learning what exactly you should be retrieving. Because if you only focus on memorizing individual vocabulary words, like lists from a textbook, well, you're still forced to do that construction work. You have to stitch those single words together grammatically in real time, and that's often what results in that kind of choppy, hesitant, almost robotic-sounding speech.
Right. So this is where we need to shift our focus away from single words and towards learning what? Natural groups of words. The kind of pre-made chunks that native speakers actually use all the time without thinking about it.
Exactly. We call them chunks or collocations or lexical bundles. The name doesn't matter as much as the concept. Your focus has to shift from just learning book to learning the phrases that contain book that native speakers really use in context. These chunks are like ready-made sentences or parts of sentences. You can just grab them and plug them straight into a conversation without having to agonize over, which preposition to use or tricky verb tenses or word order.
Okay, let's use that classic example from the research materials. If you just learned the single word book, fine, that's passive knowledge, you know what it means. But if you learn ready-made phrases around it like, can I borrow your book? Or have you read this book? Or that looks like a good book to read. Suddenly, you've acquired functional, fluent pieces of language you can actually use immediately.
And here's the deeper cognitive reason why this is so incredibly effective. It saves so much mental energy. When you retrieve a whole chunk like, can I borrow your book? The grammar is already perfectly packaged inside it. It's built in. You don't have to consciously stop and think, okay, borrow book from you. Your book. Your book. And can I goes first. No. The chunk can I borrow your book is retrieved from your memory as a single complete unit. This dramatically reduces the load on your working memory during a conversation. The research is really clear on this. Fluent speakers, native or otherwise, rely on thousands upon thousands of these prefabricated chunks. It allows them to dedicate their precious mental resources to the meaning of the conversation, to understanding the other person, to thinking about their reply, not constantly worrying about the low-level mechanics of constructing every single sentence from scratch.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So if we combine these first three techniques, we're listening deeply for the sound and rhythm, we're training ourselves to think directly in English, and we're building up this mental library of ready-made phrases, we've basically optimized our internal language engine. Okay, now let's move into the more active, sort of solo production work. Right, this next section is all about intensive practice you can do completely on your own. No need for partners, no risk of embarrassment, just pure, focused, mechanical training for your mouth and ears. We start with technique number 4.
Shadowing. Yes. This is often called the secret weapon of polyglots, people who speak many languages, and honestly, for very good reason. It is arguably the single most powerful method out there for training your mouth, your pronunciation muscles, and your ear, your perception of sounds at the exact same time.
Okay, so what does the actual method look like in practice? I mean, it sounds like just mimicking someone intensely, but is there a specific step-by-step way to do it, especially if you're just starting out?
Yes, there is, and precision is really key here. It's not just casual mimicking. First step, find a short audio clip. Maybe just a minute or even less from a podcast or a movie dialogue, something clear. Start by just listening to it once or twice. Get the gist. Then play a very short segment, maybe just 2 or 3 seconds, a single phrase. Pause it. Now repeat that phrase out loud, trying to replicate exactly what you just heard. And the critical part, the bit people often miss, is you must try to match the native speaker's tone, their specific pronunciation of each sound, and, crucially, their speed and rhythm, the stress and intonation we talked about in Technique 1.
Gotcha. So you're not just repeating the words themselves, you're trying to copy the entire sound of how they said it, the melody, the emphasis, everything.
Absolutely. The whole acoustic footprint, as you said earlier. Then, once you feel reasonably comfortable with that little 2 or 3 second chunk after a few tries, you move to the next phase. You play the original audio clip again, but this time you try to speak simultaneously with the speaker. You're attempting to track them as closely as possible, like a shadow, following maybe half a second behind them. This forces your articulatory organs, that's your tongue, your lips, your jaw, your vocal cords, to move in ways and patterns that they might not be used to.
Yeah.
It literally builds new muscle memory for producing English sounds correctly and fluently.
Wow, okay. That sounds both mentally and physically demanding. It sounds quite tiring. How do we make sure we're actually doing this effectively and, sustainably without just getting frustrated?
It is demanding. That's why the sources often describe it as like going to the gym, but for your English muscles. It's a workout. And just like the gym, you wouldn't try to lift the heaviest weight on your very first day, would you?
No, definitely not.
Same principle here. Start slow. Choose short, simple dialogues with clear articulation first. Don't pick a rapid-fire rapper to start with. The key focus areas initially should be matching the speaker's main stress points in the sentence, and also their linking sounds. You know, those places where words seem to smush together naturally in spoken English, like go out, often sounds like go out, or want to becomes wanna. Shadowing forces you to notice and reproduce those links. And consistency here is just non-negotiable, like exercise. A sporadic hour once a week is far, far less effective than doing just 10 focused minutes every single day. You need that daily repetition to train those muscles incrementally and force those new physical habits of pronunciation.
Okay, 10 minutes a day seems manageable. Technique 5 then tackles the anxiety barrier head on. The idea is if you don't have a practice partner handy, you can still get comfortable forming English sentences in real time by practicing speaking to yourself. I have to admit, I imagine many people listening might feel a bit silly doing this, talking to themselves in English.
Oh, they absolutely do initially. It feels unnatural at first for most people. But a psychological payoff is enormous. You have to push past that initial feeling. When you speak alone, you completely remove the biggest single obstacle for so many adult learners. The pressure of external judgment, the fear of making mistakes in front of someone. You're essentially giving yourself a completely safe, zero-pressure sandbox to play in. An environment where you can focus purely on the mechanics of producing speech, getting the words out without any fear.
Right. Taking the audience away removes the stage fright. So what are some simple, practical exercises we can weave into our daily lives? Things we can do without needing to schedule a specific hour for solo English practice.
Yeah, the best advice from the research is definitely to integrate it seamlessly into your existing routines. Don't try to add another big task. Basically, turn your internal monologue, the voice inside your head, into an audible one sometimes. So while you're driving or walking or doing chores, describe your day out loud in English. Okay, now I need to turn left. Or explain your thoughts on a news article you just read.
I don't really agree with that point because...
Or practice telling yourself a simple story, maybe something that happened to you. The key thing is the exercise doesn't need to involve fancy, complex academic vocabulary. It just needs to be spoken. Simple is fine. For example, just saying aloud, right, I really need to get this report finished before the end of the day, but maybe first I'll just quickly organize my desk. That counts. That's practice.
Okay, that sounds like a really direct extension of technique too, thinking directly in English. But now you're actually externalizing that internal thought process, making it physical.
Precisely. It connects the thinking directly to the speaking muscles. And the simple act of speaking more, even if it's just to yourself to the walls, directly increases your confidence. It makes the physical act of producing English sentences start to feel more automatic, less effortful, less laborious. Every single time you speak a sentence out loud, you're strengthening those neural pathways between thought and speech. You're essentially warming up your mouth and your mind, getting them ready for the speed and agility you'll need in a real conversation, but without that paralyzing fear of being interrupted or corrected by someone else.
Right.
And building directly on that solo practice, technique number 6 is something that, frankly, is almost mandatory if you want really targeted, specific improvement, recording yourself speaking. Now, I agree with you, host speaker. Many learners absolutely dread the idea of hearing their own voice recorded, let alone listening back critically to their own mistakes.
Yeah, it feels intensely vulnerable, doesn't it? Listening back to yourself fumbling for words. So why is self-recording so crucial, even if it makes us cringe?
Because, uncomfortable as it might be, self-recording is pretty much the only truly objective way you have to measure your actual progress. And, more importantly, identify your specific blind spots. See, when you're in the act of speaking, your conscious mind is overwhelmingly focused on what you're trying to say, the content, the message. You literally cannot monitor your own pronunciation accurately or notice your grammatical slip-ups or your awkward phrasing in real time. Your brain just doesn't have the capacity. The goal of recording is to force yourself, maybe later when you're less emotionally invested, to confront the cold, hard reality of how you actually sound.
Okay, so let's walk through the process. I pick a topic, maybe just describe my weekend. I talk for, say, 1 or 2 minutes into my phone. Then comes the hard part, the analysis. What specifically should we be listening for beyond just obvious grammar mistakes like using the wrong tense?
You need to listen like a detective, looking for patterns, specifically for fluency markers or the lack thereof. First, try to identify any habitual pronunciation errors. Are there specific vowel sounds or consonant sounds you consistently get wrong? Maybe the sound or the difference between ship and sheep. Write them down. Second, listen critically to your pacing and your intonation. Do you sound flat, monotone, or does your voice go up and down naturally? Are you relying too heavily on filler words like, count them. Third, try to identify words or simple sentence structures that you overuse, perhaps because they feel safe and easy. The recording will expose these linguistic crutches you rely on.
Okay. So the real magic isn't just hitting record. It's in that critical, objective analysis afterwards. It's like turning yourself into your own personal, slightly detached English coach.
Exactly that. You become your own coach. Once you have objectively identified a specific recurring issue, for example, wow, I constantly misuse the past perfect tense, or I notice I always confuse he and she when I speak quickly, or my R sound is really weak, then you can create a targeted practice plan just for that one thing. The research really emphasizes this. Actively identifying and then fixing your own observed errors leads to massive targeted improvement much, much faster than just general unfocused study. You create this powerful, personalized feedback loop that's completely unbiased. Your phone recording doesn't care about your feelings.
Yeah.
And that drives you towards specific, concrete corrective actions, rather than just having vague goals like, oh, I need to speak better English somehow.
Okay, fantastic. So we've built the cognitive foundation inside our heads, and we've hammered out the solo mechanics with things like shadowing and recording. Now we need to bridge all that internal work with the actual real world, and crucially, figure out how to sustain these habits long term. So we move now to technique number 7, which I suspect is a favorite for many learners out there.
Yes, this technique definitely merges intensive practice with, let's be honest, genuine pleasure for most people, using movies and TV shows to learn real, natural, conversational English. It's just light years ahead of those stilted, artificial dialogues you often find in language textbooks.
Yeah, absolutely. The sources suggest using popular shows, maybe ones with lots of natural, everyday dialogue. Things like the casual pace of Friends, maybe, or The Office for that workplace interaction. But how do we turn just watching TV into active learning? Is it just a case of switching on the English subtitles and hoping for the best?
Subtitles can definitely be a useful tool, especially at first, maybe for catching words you miss. But passive viewing, even with subtitles, just isn't enough for speaking improvement. You have to actively engage with the material. The process is actually quite similar to the shadowing technique we discussed earlier, Technique 4. But now, you're adding layers of emotional and cultural context on top. So, you watch a short scene, maybe just one exchange between characters. As soon as an actor delivers a line you want to learn, pause it. Then, try to repeat that line immediately, but don't just replicate the words. Try to copy the emotional expression in their voice, the specific cadence or rhythm they used, the exact tone. Were they being sarcastic, excited, annoyed?
Right, so you're not just mimicking sounds now, you're mimicking feelings and intentions too. And the benefit here must go way beyond just getting the pronunciation right. You're effectively downloading cultural knowledge and norms directly, aren't you?
Massively so. This is absolutely key for mastering what linguists call pragmatics. That's the study of how language is actually used in real social context to get things done. It's meaning beyond the literal words. By mimicking actors, you learn instinctively when a certain intonation pattern signals sarcasm or genuine excitement, or maybe passive aggression, or real annoyance, things that are purely based on subtle shifts in tone and delivery. And maybe even more importantly, you start to pick up on all those specific cultural expressions, the current slang, the idioms, the little phrases that native speakers use constantly but that standard textbooks almost never teach you. Think about the huge difference between saying, oh, that's a rather difficult situation,
Right.
which sounds quite formal, maybe even a bit stiff, and saying, wow, that's a real pickle.
Haha, yeah, in a pickle. Definitely different vibes.
Exactly. The basic meaning is similar. But in a pickle is a common cultural shortcut, an idiom that instantly conveys a certain informal, maybe slightly humorous recognition of difficulty. Mastering these kinds of nuances is what helps you eventually sound less like you're reciting from a grammar book and more like a fluent, natural participant in the culture.
Okay, love that. Using entertainment. But Technique 8 acknowledges that eventually the engine we've been building and tuning has to be tested out on the actual highway. At some point, we have to leave the safety of solo practice and move towards real-world application by joining English conversation groups or finding practice partners.
This is it. This is the crucible, really, the moment of truth. You've hopefully built up some vocabulary, you've worked on your pronunciation with shadowing and recording, you've maybe built some confidence talking to yourself. Now you need to find communities, real people, where the primary objective is simply communication, not achieving linguistic perfection. Now this could be local in-person meetups, if you can find them, but honestly, for most modern learners, it's much more accessible online. We're talking about language exchange apps. Things like HelloTalk or Tandem are often mentioned, or dedicated Discord servers for language learners, or even online tutoring platforms where you can just pay for conversational practice.
Right. So what's the most immediate, tangible benefit you get from jumping into these groups, even if it's maybe just for 15 or 20 minutes a day?
The benefit is really twofold, and it's pretty immediate. First, you get dramatically improved speaking flow under pressure. Second, you get instantaneous practice in listening comprehension in a real, unpredictable interaction. The research notes that even a short, say, 15-minute daily conversation with someone, and it doesn't even have to be a native speaker, another learner is often just as good or even better, initially forces you to do several things simultaneously. You have to process what they're saying in real time, formulate a relevant response quickly, maybe handle interruptions or ask for clarification, and manage that back and forth dynamic. This is incredibly high-speed cognitive practice for your language brain, much faster than solo work.
Okay, but let's be real. For the shy learner or someone really worried about their accent or grammar, this still sounds absolutely terrifying. How do we help people overcome that deep-seated anxiety about speaking to a stranger who might, judge their mistakes?
Yeah, the fear is real. The fundamental realization that needs to happen, the mindset shift, is that English, like any language, is ultimately about successful communication, not about achieving flawless grammatical perfection, especially not in casual conversation. When you join these groups, you very quickly realize two crucial things. One, literally everyone makes mistakes in casual conversation, including native speakers. They use sentence fragments, they pause, they correct themselves, they use fillers. It's normal. And two, the other person's primary goal, 99% of the time, is simply to understand your message. They're not sitting there with a red pen waiting to critique your use of prepositions, just focusing on getting your meaning across rather than obsessing over the grammatical mechanics of how you say it. Dramatically lowers that performance anxiety. It frees you up mentally to actually experiment with the new vocabulary and sentence structures you've been learning, which is the whole point. Which brings us neatly to technique number 9. which directly addresses the huge pitfall of burnout and inconsistency. So many learners have these bursts of intense motivation. They expect fluency to happen overnight, or they try to cram these massive heroic study sessions.
Yeah, like I'm going to study English for 5 hours this Saturday.
Exactly. And it just isn't sustainable.
Hmm.
Real, lasting improvement in a complex skill like speaking is built not on those large, sporadic, heroic efforts, but on consistent, small, manageable daily practice. It's the tortoise, not the hare.
Right. We have to actively combat that huge overnight success myth that's so prevalent. So instead of setting these vague, overwhelming goals like, I will study more English this week, the sources strongly advocate setting very specific, achievable, almost micro goals every day.
Precisely. Vague aspirations just lead to procrastination and guilt. We need concrete, non-negotiable commitments. So instead of trying to dedicate, say, 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon, which you might skip if you're tired, commit to something small but definite every single day. Make it part of your routine. The sources give some excellent concrete examples. Okay, my goal today is, I will speak in English out loud for at least 5 minutes. Maybe talking to yourself, maybe shadowing. Or, today, I will learn 3 new useful phrases and actively try to use each one in a sentence I say or write. Or even just, today I will successfully shadow 2 complete sentences from that movie clip accurately. Small wins.
That feels very much like the concept of habit stacking, doesn't it? Making the required practice so small and achievable that it's almost impossible not to do it, harder to skip than to just get it done. That is absolutely the core idea. It leverages the power of consistency. The cumulative effect of these tiny, consistent daily practices vastly outweighs those occasional large bursts of effort. If you achieve a small, specific goal every single day, you get a little dopamine hit, you reinforce the habit loop in your brain, and the skill starts to genuinely wire itself into your long-term memory and automatic processing. It's that gentle, constant, daily reinforcement that drives genuine, lasting fluency. It's about converting these techniques from just exercises I should do into ingrained, lifelong habits.
Okay, perfect. And that brings us to the final technique, number 10. This really gets to the psychological heart of fluency. It's the ultimate mindset shift, without which, honestly, all the mechanical practice in the world might still fail. And the core principle is, you absolutely cannot fear making mistakes. You must shift your focus entirely onto the act of communication itself. This is it. This is probably the single most crucial skill or other attitude for any language learner to cultivate. The courage to fail, maybe even fail loudly and awkwardly at times. We have to internalize and accept the relativity of error. It's not black and white. The sources constantly remind us, and it's true that even highly educated native speakers use incomplete sentences, misplace modifiers, mix up their tenses slightly, use fillers, and stumble over words in casual, spontaneous dialogue all the time. It's how natural speech works. Grammatical perfection is a complete myth in everyday conversation, and actively pursuing it above all else is usually a direct road to just staying silent.
Okay, so if perfect grammatical accuracy isn't the true measure of success when we're speaking, then what is? What should we be aiming for instead?
Successful communication. Simply getting your message across effectively, being understood, connecting with the other person. That's the goal. Every single time you open your mouth and try to speak English, even if you stutter, even if you misuse a preposition, even if you have to stop and backtrack and rephrase, every single attempt is actively training your brain. You're training it to be faster, to be more resilient, to access words more quickly, to become more natural over time. Confidence doesn't come from waiting until you magically achieve some theoretical state of perfection that doesn't really exist. Confidence is derived directly from the doing, from the practice, from the attempts themselves, successful or not.
Wow. Okay. So the final piece of advice, synthesizing all the research here, is basically speak more, speak often, try not to overthink it, laugh at the inevitable mistakes when they happen, and just keep the momentum going, treating every error not as some kind of embarrassing failure, but maybe as just a useful piece of data that informs what you need to work on next.
That is the perfect summary. That's the mindset. The anxiety that completely locks up so many potentially fluent speakers, it nearly always stems from that deep fear of judgment, of looking foolish. Once you truly internalize that errors are not just normal, but are actually valuable data points necessary for the learning process, like stumbling is necessary when you're learning to ride a bike, then that fear starts to dissipate. And when the fear goes down, you're finally free to prioritize what really matters in conversation: speed, message transmission, connection, rather than constantly monitoring yourself for flawless linguistic construction. #tag outro.
We have covered a truly remarkable and I think really practical set of powerful tools here today. 10 keys to unlocking fluency. From those foundational cognitive shifts, like really listening deeply to the music of English and forcing yourself to actually think in English, all the way through to the intensive solo practice methods like shadowing and self-recording. And finally, landing on the importance of real-world application, daily micro habits, and cultivating that fearless communication mindset. The cumulative effect of integrating even just 3 or 4 of these 10 techniques into your daily routine consistently day after day, while the sources suggest it will lead to rapid and noticeable fluency growth.
Absolutely. If you only take away 3 essential principles from our deep dive today, let it be these. 1. Practice something, anything, a little bit, but do it every single day. Consistency trumps intensity. 2. Make a conscious effort to force yourself to think in English before you try to speak. Bypass that translation step. And 3. Find some way to genuinely enjoy the process of learning and discovery. Try to embrace the awkwardness, the mistakes, see them as signs of progress, signs of growth.
That's great advice. And as we close out this deep dive, let's just quickly circle back to Technique 7 using movies and TV shows. We talked about how it helps you understand those subtle, culturally specific expressions, the ones textbooks always seem to miss. And you emphasize that true mastery isn't just knowing the words, but understanding the social context, the why behind them.
Exactly. And this raises, I think, an important final challenge for you, the listener, to take away and mull over. Based on this knowledge now, I encourage you, go and find one phrase or expression from your favorite English language media. It could be a line from a sitcom you love, a specific lyric from a song, a memorable movie quote, anything. And really analyze why that particular phrase is used in that specific social context in the show or film. Go beyond just the literal dictionary translation. Ask yourself, what feeling does this phrase really convey? Is it sarcasm? Is it vulnerability? Is it showing affection? Is it maybe marking group identity? What kind of cultural baggage or assumptions does it carry with it? Because understanding that deeper social nuance, that's really the final key, I believe, to unlocking true communicative mastery and genuine participation in the language and culture.
That is a brilliant final challenge. A perfect place to end. Now go forth, listen deeply, practice consistently, and above all, speak fearlessly. We'll catch you next time for the next deep dive.